Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Toolkit Tuesday for the month of May. Hard to believe that we're already almost halfway through this year. So thanks for being here tonight. Hello to everybody who's watching it in the replay. And so tonight we're going to talk about mental health in the church. And I talked a little bit about it in some posts this week, that it just continues to be, and increasingly so post-COVID, a threat to the church if left unaddressed. And so I brought on my brother. So when Chris says what friends will do, Nick and I have been friends for so many years. I almost hate saying it because it dates me, because I'm still on my 25th birthday. But he and I met.
How many times over?
What did you say?
How many times have you been? 25, 30?
I'm not going to talk about that kind of stuff. So Nick and I met when he was the director of safety for the city of Milwaukee, and I was working for the National Safety Council, and he was my client. So every year we'd spend a bunch of time at the conferences and got to know each other. And he became like an uncle to my son, and we kind of grew up in safety together, if you will. We've done a bunch of projects together, and so again, he is doctoral certification in organizational behavioral psychology, Master of Science in Counseling, a Master of Arts in Adult Education and Distance Learning, an executive coach, speaker, and training with John Maxwell's leadership team, certified emotional intelligence coach, and a licensed clinical substance abuse counselor. So if you were at our summit last year, he spoke on the topic, and so he's going to talk to us about it tonight. And hopefully be back at the summit this year to run one of the tracks. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Nick. I'm gonna set it up so you can share your screen. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, Nick. Thanks.
Thank you. As Angelia indicated, yes, I have known her when I had no gray. Now I got a little bit of gray. And I'm happy to talk on this subject. And as she indicated, I've had many tracks in my career, one being safety and health, of which I still do some consulting in the area, but also leadership, organizational development, as well as counseling and therapy. And so while I am a national and international chemical addiction counselor, most of my clients are dual diagnosis. So they usually have other challenges as it relates to mental health outside of just substance abuse. And so it's common to see someone who has multiple diagnoses, including substance use. So I've seen it, dealt with it, and worked with several clients over the years. Probably for the last 15 years, been in the counseling realm, and have dealt with that, certainly as it correlates to this work. And to your point, Angelia, I'm currently working on a certification as a certified employee assistant professional, because I do so much work inside the organizations, supporting wellness and wholeness at work and in the profession. So I'm going to share. Let's see here what I put together here.
What I left out of the introduction is we're both PKs. So we know church first before we know anything else. So both been doing church for as long as we've been alive.
Absolutely.
When I was a kid, I had a drug problem. They said, what? I said, I got drugged to Sunday school. I got drugged to Bible class. I got drugged to church. So did Nick. There you go. All right, you ready?
Yep. So let me make sure I got this correct here. So the goal of today is to give you some awareness, and I'll have some time for questions as we finish, but give you some awareness about mental health, mental illness, And because we believe in the industry that as we have more education around the subject, education around the topic, and to me, it's the same with incidents and things that we've had and we've seen in the industry with workplace violence and mass shootings and all of that stuff. I know from a statistics standpoint, 85% of the time, there's warning signs. And the key is that we oftentimes miss the warning signs. And so hopefully the education and the insight that I'll give you today will kind of help us to be able to identify, you know, some of what we might see as warning signs and be able to lean in and offer some support and help through the process. So this is kind of the direction that I'm going this evening. Excuse me, and forgive me for my voice. I have a very, very, very bad sore throat.
Ooh.
So I'm drinking my hot tea right now. So the direction that we're going down this evening is we'll talk about what's mental health, understanding mental illness, causes of mental illness, the impact of stigma, recognizing the signs and symptoms, treatment options, supporting others and seeking help, and then we'll wrap up with questions if anyone has any. So from an overview standpoint, almost 6 in 10 people, or what we would say 58% of the United States, are concerned about their mental health. 42% often feel anxious and depressed, yet only 20% indicate they are seeking mental health support consistently when needed, according to the research findings from nonprofit Transamerica Institute. Excuse me. So this, for me, in being in the industry, is not an alarming statistic, but I show it so that we recognize that it's not uncommon. And especially this day and age, as we've raised the awareness around mental health and wellness over the last several years, more and more individuals are taking ownership of their mental and emotional wellness. So a lot of people are speaking up that wouldn't otherwise have spoken up before. And we see, you know, more people engaging in seeking out assistance more than they have historically in the past. So from a mental health standpoint, so when we hear that word mental health, what comes to mind? When you hear mental health, what does that mean to you?
Oh, well, I got the definition there.
Very good. So when we hear mental health, it really involves our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. So it affects how we think, how we act, how we cope with life's challenges, and it also helps determine how we will handle stress, relate to others, make choices. Positive mental health allows us to realize our full potential, cope with day-to-day stresses in life, work productively, and make meaningful contributions in our community and churches. So the reality is when we hear the word mental health, it's not automatically a negative connotation to it. We each actually are, on average, have a level of resiliency to manage our day-to-day mental health. Okay, so for the most part, mental health is, you know, our mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional well-being. And when all of those are in alignment, it's a good day. And not that we don't always feel good. We don't always have, you know, we're not always good emotionally, depending on if we've got some bad news or dealing with something. But what we will do, what we typically do as individuals is we make adjustments to that so that we can get to our center, or we can get to some level of peace and comfort. When you shift to mental illness, That's deeper. And mental illness are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, behavior, and/or a combination of all of these associated with distress, problem functioning in social work and family activities. Common conditions include depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar, schizophrenia, and there are a whole lot more in the DSM-5 Bible that we use as clinicians. These are the common ones we see in today's society, which is inclusive of personality disorders. And so when someone has a mental illness, they may be suffering from one of these things. And if they are suffering from one of these things, it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, because you can have a mental illness, and if it's treated appropriately, you can actually manage your day-to-day social functioning, daily functioning, work, family activities, and do well. Okay? There are lots of people out there in industry who suffer from these particular diagnoses and live very, very normal, healthy lives because they stay connected with their mental health providers, they stay connected with therapy, and some may be connected with daily regimen of psychotropic medications. So it's normal, and it can be normal. So if someone has these diagnoses, the big thing that we're concerned with, or we always should be concerned with, is that how are they doing well managing it? How are they able to manage things, and how are they managing? And so just using depression, for example, depression in and of itself can be manageable. We all can have some level of depression based on what we got going on in our lives. And depending on your mental health determines how well you can manage it. Any of these diagnoses can become unmanageable. And when they do become unmanageable, it takes us to this space of we need help. We need help. When unmanaged, they each will also show us warning signs. Okay, so we'll see some warning signs out there that will let us know, hey, someone's not their normal self. And I always use the example of, we go to church on a at least, a couple times a week. I'm used to going a couple times a week, Bible class and Sunday, and oftentimes we see the same or similar people every time we come. So we're observant. We're paying attention to the people that we see, whether they're well or unwell, we're paying attention. And so the question I have, and sometimes we put this out here, is that when we notice differences, when we notice something as simple as, and I always use this example, and I didn't do this in church, but I did this at when I was working. And so I wore the exact same thing Monday through Friday. I put the exact same clothes on every single day. But what I didn't do was, and my hair was lowered, much shorter than it is now, but I didn't comb my hair. And other than, I usually shave on the weekends, and then I shave like maybe on Monday or Tuesday, so it'll last all week. So I didn't shave all week. So that each day I would look progressively different, from the hair not being brushed or combed and the shave. And I wore the exact same thing every single day. And by Friday, I went around, and I made sure that when I did this, I went around every single department. I was visible. I was talking to people, engaging people. I wasn't smelly. I took a bath every day, but I just
Praise
had the
God.
exact same clothes. And so, but I physically looked different by Friday. And I asked, I went around to the different departments. I asked, I said, have you noticed anything different about me all week? For the most part, it was no. Until I actually said, well, I've had the exact same thing on every day this week. And then I said, you notice I haven't combed my hair. And I said, and I haven't shaved all week. You can see the hair growing on my face, and it's obvious that I haven't shaved, and I'm not really kind of clean cut like I normally am, and you all see me every single day. And as I went to the departments, went around, I probably talked to about 50 or 60 people.
Wow.
Of that, maybe 5 said, I noticed it, but I just assumed, you might have had something going on, but I didn't want to say anything. And I said, but you know me, you know me, you see me. Were you concerned? A couple people said, yeah, I was concerned, but I didn't want to say anything. And so it's things like that we sometimes miss out of the fear of, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to offend, or I don't want to, come out of pocket or be out of line. But something as simple as, hey, Nick, you doing okay? You all right? Would trigger me to say that you probably noticed something. Because most of the time, when individuals are suffering from mental illness that is moving into the area of unmanageability, they will unconsciously and sometimes consciously send warning signs to people that know them. And some of the simplest warning signs are, they're not shaving. They're not, groomed like they normally are. They don't care what they got on. They're starting to lessen their pride around their basic needs. And those are some of the first real live things that we normally see, but oftentimes they're not spoken of. And something as simple as, are you okay? Are you all right? Do you need anything? I'm here if you need to talk. You don't have to really go into it. Or something as simple as, you just look a little different. You don't look yourself. But if you're okay, that's okay. You just sent a message that said, I see you. I notice you. And I just want to make sure you're okay. Okay. So some causes of mental illnesses are things like genetics. Mental illness can run in the family, suggesting genetic links. So there are some diagnoses that are genetic. We typically will find, especially with personality disorders, like schizophrenia and things of that nature. We do find history in the family with those level of diagnoses. Some mental illnesses can be environmentally based, exposure to environmental stressors, inflammatory conditions, toxins, alcohol, drugs, while in the womb, can also sometimes be associated with mental illnesses. And this is when moms are using drugs and alcohol. It impacts the mental wellness of the unborn child, and then the child can be born. Children are actually can be born addicted to alcohol, and also withdrawing when they actually are born. So you have to go through that whole process, just like an adult going into detox. Sometimes you have to do those with infants when they're born. Life experiences, so such as stress or history of abuse, particularly if it occurred in childhood. A lot of times things that occur in childhood, while people might be learning of themselves and finding themselves, they don't know other than to stuff. And so we stuff. And what I mean by stuff, we log it into our mental and emotional history. we're not taught how to deal with it. We're not taught how to manage it. We're not taught how to do anything. If we don't get help right away, it just sits there. And that trauma, if experienced again, or we have the same feeling of that trauma, or maybe it was an individual, we see that individual, all of those things can bring up what we sometimes refer to as PTSD, as though you're reliving that trauma in that moment, and can cause mental distress in the moment, what we call psychosis moments, or in some cases, mania. And so those things can impact mental illness. And then biological factors such as chemical imbalances in the brain, physical illnesses, injuries that affect brain functioning. Whenever we have that, you're nine times out of 10, it will probably involve some sort of psychotropic medication to make sure that what the brain is missing, we will put it back in the form of some sort of medication to stabilize things for the individual. The importance, the impact of stigma is, the stigma and discrimination can be the suffering and disability associated with mental disorders, leading to various social movements aimed at changing public attitudes and policies. Reducing stigma involves understanding and education to foster acceptance and compassion. A lot of people don't understand mental illness, and so it gets a bad rap. And sometimes people discriminate against them. Sometimes people who don't understand it, they may lose an opportunity. They may treat them differently. And the unique thing here is historically, and this is probably in most of the states, years ago, when someone had severe mental illness, including severe unmanageable depression, we institutionalized them. So we had facilities that institutionalized them beyond the ones the very small amount that we have now, which will institutionalize those who have the higher risk of harm to themselves and others. We institutionalized most of them. And so we've gotten away from those facilities, and we rely on a lot of individuals to self-manage everything from medication management to, just being out in the community and the public amongst everybody else. So what that leads to is, if someone is trying to assimilate in society and wants to be normal and wants to feel normal and interact and communicate and all those things, just like what they believe normal people do, they won't take their medication, or they'll shy away from being involved in therapy and seeing their psychiatrist and so on and so forth, all in the name of, I can do this, and if I'm not on my medication, I'm not doing these things, I can be normal. But there's that unmanageability. And so the unmanageability in there means how I'll deal with that is I'll drink, or I'll smoke, or I'll use drugs, but I'll anesthetize the mood to help me manage through the process. And oftentimes drugs and alcohols doesn't do it. It might mask it for a moment, but it doesn't do it. And so you still have the unmet need of managing the mental health. And so what we've encouraged, and one of the things that we've done at our church, is we have actually, we have a couple of members who have adult children and teenagers who suffer from mental illnesses that are severe, like personality disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar, and some other ones. And what the parents have done, even with their adult children, is they filled out what we call emergency contact cards. And there are also profile cards. And so there are times when parents will come to church and say, my son is coming, but just so you know, he's been off his meds for 2 weeks. Okay, that way the church officials know that if you see some sort of erratic behavior or things of that nature, this is why. So we know how to handle them, especially if we also have to call police or somebody or 911 to restrain them for whatever reason. We're able to do that, but we're able to have some history. So if we do have to call 911 for whatever reason or anything like that, we know that if they're a risk of doing harm to others, then we will kind of meet them at the door. You know, if they're risking doing harm, we'll meet them at the door. And we will talk to them and say, hey, you know, stay here with us, hang out here with us. If you're good, we can watch it. You know, we have an area where we can watch the service on a big screen. Stay in here with us, hang out with us just to make sure you're good. We're here to support you, get through the process, and hang out with us. But they don't really transition into the big, huge congregation, especially if they come in already in a complete psychosis or mania, because sometimes that has also happened. But for the most part, we know the families have already advised us who they are. Now, in an ideal situation, and certainly larger churches than ours, you may not always be able to do that if it's the public from the outside coming in. So you may or may not know that. And those are those moments where it's like, hey, let me pay attention. And if I see some behavior that doesn't seem normal, I see some behavior that seems kind of unusual, somewhat different, somewhat unusual, just let your safety team know and your security team know so that they can just monitor the behavior to make sure things, look, and appear okay. Because someone could just be exhausted or tired or whatever that looks like. And someone very well may be in what we call pre-crisis mode.
So Nick, we have a raised hand. So John has a question for you.
Go ahead, John.
Hey there, thank you. Yeah, just curious. So we're on a safety team. We know they've registered that profile card, which is a great idea. We don't actually have that, something we need to consider. Or you see someone come in and there's something, fairly obvious. What words would you say or not say to try to encourage that person to sit outside when they probably walked in with the intention of going into the main sanctuary? Are there any things you definitely do or do not want to say that, might make it worse or better?
Well, I would say one of the things you don't want to do are use judgment statements. And so some of the statements that we've used is, good morning. How's everything going? How you feeling? How you feeling? How's your day going this morning? So it's kind of like almost casual conversation.
Yep.
And then, are you okay? Everything going good? And most of the time they'll say if they're okay, if they're not going good, no, I'm not okay, but I'm here. I'm kind of struggling a little bit, but I'm here. And so then from there we can say, okay, well, why don't we do this? So you don't have to be in the whole crowd while you're feeling uncomfortable and while you're struggling. Just come on in the overflow room. We can still see the service, and I'll stay here and support you. If you're feeling, if you're feeling something or you feel like you need some assistance, just let me know.
Nice.
So
you don't have to be in the crowd. That would be something that would, like, you're offering them a bit of relief, right?
Right.
Nice.
The big thing is the judgment statements now, because we've cautioned people. You don't look right. You smell. You can't go in there. Things like that. Because sometimes I will tell you, when this does happen, they probably don't have no dress up clothes on, and they're probably just casual clothes on. And if they've tried to self-medicate, they may smell of alcohol. Those are kind of some signs and symptoms that they may smell of alcohol, or their eyes may be appear to be dilated or red. And, they may not be keeping up with hygiene or hair and stuff like that. So those are some of the obvious signs that you can see. But again, if we're using that compassion approach, the loving approach to handle it, again, all in the name of we want to support you and help you through the process. But if you want to see the service and be involved, we still have an opportunity for you to be able to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. So these are some myths and facts about mental health. One of the myths is people with mental illness cannot be successful at work or school. Well, that's definitely a myth. Individuals with mental health diagnosis are successful at work, school, and in the community. So this is not a stigma. We don't want to look down or bad on them because, I always say I'm one event, one phone call away from potential depression. So we all have the resiliency of being able to manage, but life can happen. You could hear some bad news and it could really take you in a depressive mode to the point where it may very well be unmanageable. And so it's good to encourage people to talk to somebody, to keep checking on them and keep engaging them so that they get the help they need. But more importantly, during those moments and periods, they still feel love. They still feel like we care. They still feel like they matter. And they don't move in what we call this place of hopelessness. Another myth, mental health is not that prevalent. Again, as we stated earlier, 1 in 5 Americans experience mental health illness in their lifetime. 1 in 25 Americans will experience serious mental illness that impairs one or more of their major life functions. So it's very prevalent. It is very real. It's not so much rare in as much as folks just admitting it and seeking help so that it's okay. Another myth, individuals with mental health are dangerous. Interesting fact, having a mental health disorder does not increase the chance of violence or danger to others. On the contrary, individuals with mental health disorders are 4 times more likely to be victims of violence themselves. So that dispels that myth. You will never recover from mental illness. Mental health issues are not always lifelong disorders, such as anxiety and depression, only require short-term treatment and or medication. So most mental health disorders are very much treatable. And as I stated earlier, you can live very, very normal lives through that process. And these are some of the signs and symptoms, and this is just a few, there are others, but some of the signs and symptoms that we look at, someone frequently crying or frequently emotional. So angry on one minute and then sad in the next minute for no real pinpointed rhyme or reason, especially when you see that going on throughout the day and over several days. That's telling you that the unmanageability is coming out in that way, through that level of emotion. Feeling worthless or guilty, decreased motivation. So lack of productivity, lack of engagement and involvement. And again, I'm so used to coming to church and those people that I interact with, and everybody interacts with somebody every Sunday. I'm so used to seeing people and engaging people. And so when I see those individuals and they are not themselves, they're not in the praise and worship like they normally do, or they're quiet or they're crying. And sometimes that's just part of the emotion in the service, but not all the time. But in any event, no matter what it looks like, I'm usually consoling, making sure they're good, making sure they're okay, but also paying attention, especially if you see it continuously, you start to see a pattern of something. too much sleep or unable to sleep. One of the symptoms of mental health disorders is not motivated to get up. So we want to just sleep the day away. And then on the other end, we're insomnia. So we're up and we're up and we're up. And then when we crash, it's like midday. And so the sleep patterns are completely all thrown off, all because the mind is racing way too much and it's unmanageable. And then which leads me to racing thoughts. When you just got those thoughts that are racing and it's all over the board, it becomes overwhelming. And these are things that when we're talking to someone, or if we're triaging this from a assessment standpoint, we're asking these type of questions just to get a feel or an idea of where they are mentally, physically, emotionally. Thoughts of death or suicide. When someone starts talking about wanting to die, not wanting, not having the will to live, we look at that kind of twofold. If they're under the influence of substances, it could be substance-induced thoughts. If it's just depression, unmanageable depression, we take it a step further with, trying to find out, do they really have a plan? You want to do this? Have you thought about this? How long have you thought about this? Is there really an actual plan? And what is that plan? And what do you plan to do? And when it gets down to that, that tells you that someone has fully thought it through when there's in fact the plan. And in those moments, we're calling 911. We're getting them to we're getting them out of crisis mode because that's where they're at. And if left by themselves, they may very well carry it out. So that's a real critical one. And so this one is real big because in the age that we are in technology, because some of us are connected with peers and colleagues and folks on social media as well as in person in church. And so I tend to pay attention to all the people I'm connected with in church. I'm connected with their social medias too. And not that I'm trolling, but when stuff shows up on my timeline that's unusual, and in fact, I would say probably like a month ago, a young lady at church had something that showed up on our timeline, and I pointed it out to my wife, and we reached out to her because it just didn't sound like her. And we were concerned if her page was hacked, and it wasn't, but we found out she was just going through a rough time right now. But at that time that we reached out, she had found her way to her mom's house and her family's house, and she was with them. But just paying attention to stuff like this, because this can somehow have a correlation to what we see out there with mass shootings and incidents and stuff of violence and stuff like that. So when someone shifts to the dark, and we call it the dark side, oftentimes the cry for help may not be to a family member or someone. They may put it out on social media to what they consider their friends by nature of what it's defined as. And so they may just put a statement out there, or they may put a picture out there. And that may be the cry for help. And so when we spot that, it's not a bad thing to say, hey, call 911, can you go do a wellness check? Or if we know somebody that's connected to them, say, hey, did you notice what was on, their social media? Are they okay? Can you talk to them? Or if I have their personal phone number, I just call them. Are you good? What was that statement? Tell me what that is. What's going on? Talk to me. And those type of actions can help diffuse a situation because, again, psychologically, someone hears, they matter, you care, you're concerned, and you're there to get them help. And those type of actions you would be surprised the percentage that it pulls people off the ledge for. It's oftentimes when we miss the warning signs, we miss all the signs and the cries for help, that we respond way too late. And so those are real big things to pay attention to and be alerted to. A lack of energy could be a sign of some sort of concern, unmotivated. And when you start to hear, and the key is when you start to hear this often, oh, I'm just not motivated. I'm just kind of, I don't have any energy. I don't feel like getting up. I don't feel like going to work. I don't feel like, I just want to kind of be isolated and alone. When you see those type of things, that tells you something might be going on. And so I may say things like, especially with my children, this is like the third time you done told me that you unmotivated or you don't have no energy. What's going on right now? What do you got going on? And so just listening, you got to just, in this day and age, with technology so much the way it is, you have to listen. We have to listen, we have to pay attention, and we got to reach out. We got to reach out. And it's gone are the days where you just stayed connected by phone. And so my mother, who is 80, is very much still old school. And so I can call her right now today and she said, how you doing? I say, I'm good, mama. Everything going good? Yeah, mama, everything's good. And she'll say, no, it's not. I go, no, mom, I'm good. She said, no, I need you to come see me. I need to eyeball you. I need to see you. I need to look at you. I need to look on you because it's not good. I'm thinking I'm hiding it and trying to just be professional and cordial and respectful. But because she's old school, she know that don't sound like her boy. So she needs to check on you. And so we got to have that instinctiveness. I have it with my own children. We got to have that instinctiveness with our family, friends, and loved ones, just to really lean in when we start to see or hear things that don't just seem quite right. Loss of interest in activities they once enjoyed, shortness of breath, numbness in hands and feet. Those are some of the physiological things that happen when we are having anxiety and panic attacks. Trouble concentrating all the way up to a full-blown panic attack. And the best thing with anxiety and panic attacks is to encourage someone to just breathe. Just breathe. Just take short breaths in and out as you see it coming on. And your first physiological response that they feel is that their heart is beating fast and is beating out of whack, and that scares people. In those moments, if we just encourage them to just have a seat and take some deep breaths, just take some deep breaths, because panic attacks are sending the brain the message that you need to go to fight or flight mode real quick. And the only way to slow that down, because the brain says, I gotta make a whole bunch of dopamine and adrenaline because you gotta fight or you gotta get out. And it's not the case. It may be a moment, it may be a situation, it may be something they're thinking about. And so in that moment, we just encourage people to just relax, take some breaths, just take some breaths, breathe in and out, slowly breathe in and out. So the body stops producing any extra adrenaline, we call the brain chemicals, that puts us back in a normal, even keel. And if it gets to the point of unmanageability, yep, they're going to have trouble breathing. They're going to have trouble. They're going to have all kinds of other physiological conditions, up to and including they pass out, they faint, and they may need oxygen because they're not breathing properly. And so they'll feel some people feel similar symptoms of a heart attack, but it's really not a heart attack. They just need to calm themselves down, relax, and get to a safe place. So in those moments, reassuring words, reassuring language, letting them know you're here, you're there, letting them know that you got help coming on the way, and they'll be okay. And those are things that kind of help them come down. So this is a very nice chart. I like this chart because it helps us to kind of see where things can actually be. So if you look at on my screen, it's the upper left-hand corner where you see the arrow pointing to severe mental illness, and you see the up arrow turning to good mental illness. If I'm leaning into those areas, it shows you that you can have good mental health with mental illness. So I can be okay with mental health, mental illness, and still be in good mental health because it's managed. I'm doing what I need to do. I'm seeing my therapist. I'm taking my medication. I got amazing family support. Everyone knows what I got going on. And I can function, manage, do everything I need to do in life, and it's all good. Okay? If you go to the right of that, good mental health without mental illness, I'm still good. I don't have any mental illness, no health, no concerns, but I'm able to manage. Okay. Now, if I stay in that zone, now I could have not so good mental health with no mental illness, where I'm just kind of feeling a little funky, a little bit of depression, but I can self-manage that. So it's not to the point where it's unmanageable. If we look at the lower part, where we have severe mental illness and poor mental health, those two combinations is not a good day. So if I got unmanageability on mental illness and I'm depressed, I'm anxiety, and I don't have a way to manage through that, those are the bottoms is where we find ourselves in crisis mode. Sometimes I can have poor mental health, but I don't have to have mental illness. So I'm just feeling symptoms of depression. I'm just feeling symptoms of anxiety. And I need to get some help. I need to get some help in order to get me back to the good zone, the good mental health zone. So it's a nice, good chart to look at to show you kind of the difference when it comes to mental health and mental illness. And this is the chart that I showed that I thought was a pretty good chart. I showed this in our training last year. This is the mental health continuum. And when we see where it's green at, there's virtually minimal to no distress. Our mental health is healthy, and we're functioning normal. We don't have any mental illnesses, and we're functioning normal. As we move across the continuum, we might have some mild distress, but we are equipped and capable of reversing the distress. So I can basically manage it. Okay. I had a moment of depression. I got some bad news and it just put me in a funk for a couple of days, but I'm bouncing back. So our resiliency has kicked in. We've prayed. We've asked God to get us through that, and we're back. We got our focus back, so we're good. Okay. Now, when we move into the moderate to severe stage, we're coming out further out of the green, and we're in the moderate. And moderate starts to take us to the unmanageability. So there's significant functional impairment, which means I can't manage, I need some help. So I need to see a professional, or I may be able to manage this through psychotropic medication. Okay. And that gets me back to the mild stage, which lets me manage the day-to-day and resiliency, where I get back to healthy mode. This is where we're saying, hey, we got to go see somebody. We should go see somebody. We should go talk to somebody. It's this stage where I'm asking questions like, if you have a mental health diagnosis, have you been taking your meds? Have you been taking your meds consistently? Because the things we don't like to hear in this profession is, well, I take the meds when I feel things coming on. And some mental health diagnoses, you got to take the medication for constant maintenance. So there is no you stop and you good because your medicine's working and you feeling good. You can't stop taking the medication. You got to keep taking the medication because you need it to balance out where the chemical imbalance is in the brain. So you got to take it just like vitamins every single day. So even if you're feeling great, you still take your medication. So you can't have those moments of highs and lows because otherwise you have these type of symptoms. When you get to the severe mental illness, severe and persistent functional impairment, oftentimes this may lead to hospitalization, intensive outpatient, but something that's more probably severe in terms of treatment than just outpatient, until we can get you to a level of mental and emotional and physiological stability, where when we do the tests to see where you are, you're no longer severe, you're in that mild to healthy zone. And these are some treatment options for mental illness that you probably will hear. Treatment depends on a specific mental illness, and they can include medication, they can include psychotherapy, typically cognitive behavioral therapy, they can include lifestyle adjustments, support groups, education on how to manage the condition, and hospitalization if necessary. So everybody is different. This is not a one size fits all. When we do recommendations in this particular industry, everybody's situations and circumstances will always look different because their experiences are different. And depending on their physiological makeup, their diet, their height and weight, their health overall, their cognition, their experiences, all of that goes into play in how we ultimately treat them and support them during the process.
So can I
Yeah.
ask a quick question? How many of the churches represented here have support groups for mentally challenged people? Anybody? Support groups at their church. Okay. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep. Good question. I'm here in Dallas. I'm a member of the TD Jakes the Potter's House. And we have a whole, I'm part of the counseling ministry. So we have a whole team of counselors that are available when church service is going on, and when church services actually is not going on. So if someone's dealing with something outside of church, we have the support lines that they can still call as members to get support. So it's always there for them, especially if they are kind of like an EAP line, especially if they don't have insurance or don't feel comfortable talking to, anyone else. We are believers and also practitioners, and they may feel a little bit more, close and open to talking to people. So it's a good thing.
So backup question, does anybody have pastors on call? Or like clinicians on call, like during a service? So we've had this before where during a service, somebody walks in and it's something more than our welcome team is able to deal with. Like, is there somebody to call to say, okay, I'm gonna take you to the prayer room or whatever your designated space is, and someone's gonna come and talk to you? Anybody? Let's see. Parkview has care and recovery groups every Monday evening. We have security serving on some of those evenings, depending on the group. Yep, that's good. And then Mary says, curious, the statistics at the beginning, are those pre or post COVID? You mentioned inflammatory conditions. Can you describe those?
Okay.
So she's asking, the statistics at the beginning, are they pre or post COVID? And then can you describe inflammatory?
Okay, good question. Statistics at the beginning are 2022. And inflammatory conditions, do you remember what context it was in? You can unmute yourself. Oh, physiologically. I think I know what you're talking about. Inflammatory conditions means that you can have let me go back to where I saw that.
Yeah, it was at it was at the very beginning, not long after you mentioned the statistics, and you were talking about things that can predispose you to mental illness, and you had mentioned inflammatory conditions. And as a nurse, my understanding of inflammatory conditions may be different than your definition of inflammatory conditions.
Yes, so inflammatory conditions, meaning like situations that you might find yourself in that have amplified.
Okay, all right, very good.
They have amplified to the level that it's now becoming unmanageable.
Yeah, that you have to react to something.
Yes.
As opposed to you have a genetic inflammatory condition such as lupus, scleroderma, blah blah blah, which can also predispose to some mental health issues.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Great point.
Well, like inflammatory situations, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So offering supportive listening ear, helping others feel that they're not alone, encouraging professional help when needed, maintaining supportive environment can all aid to someone dealing with mental health. And I put these steps here as if we suspect that someone is at risk. I put some of these things here as recognize signs and symptoms. I can't stress enough, just really kind of being observant, paying attention, approach with care and compassion. We're interested, we're concerned, we love, we care about. We want to make sure you're good, you're well. Listen without pressuring. So all we can do is ask. If they don't want to, take our advice or take our suggestion, then we might have to let them, kind of move on, but just watch and observe. So because we don't want to not escalate their mental, whatever they might have going on, and we don't want to amplify the situation that may very well not need to be amplified. Encourage professional help. It's not a bad thing to say, hey, have you talked to someone? Do you want a referral to talk to someone? Or they may say, yep, I'm talking to somebody. You might find that they are talking to somebody. And so you say, but are you okay now? Do you need to talk to somebody now? Just really stay connected and be encouraging. Provide any further information and resources that you might have locally, globally. A lot of local places, depending on where you are, have toll-free numbers, crisis lines, things of that nature that we can give, that they can talk to someone right away. Assess for immediate risk. So depending on how they're communicating, their language, do you need anything now? And they may look, malnourished. They may look under the influence, they may look like they really need medical attention, those are the immediate risk that you want to look at, and then follow up. I'm always big on when I've had to intervene in a situation to check with them a week or so later, or check with a family member or somebody just to make sure that they're good. And a lot of times people are appreciative that, hey, thank you for checking in. I'm good. I'm stabilized. Everything's going good. I appreciate the follow-up. That's always good because again, you're sending the message that when this happens again, you got help, because they'll remember how we responded historically.
Right.
And they can see, hey, you helped me, somebody was there. So then they'll be less reluctant to take the help because they see we're doing it because we love them. We care for them and we want to make sure they're good. And then last but not least, I can't stress this enough, is part of us being in service to others also means that we have to take care of ourselves. So, I mean, I've been through crisis situations, suicide situations, situations where, you know, people didn't make it, and things of that nature, and debriefing and stuff like that. And it is mental and emotionally exhausting. And so we have to remember as practitioners, as folks in this profession, especially as we're working to serve and serve others, that we take care of us. So give yourself some grace, give yourself some empathy, give yourself some compassion. You know, take the time to make sure you're processing, that that you cycle through yourself and know, God, I did the best that I could. And I thank you for my input that I was able to have to help them get through the process. The rest is in your hands. And so we got to be able to do that for ourselves, in addition to the work which we do in service to others. So that's all that I have. Any questions?
I have, I think,
Go ahead, Mary.
two. One is you had mentioned that you have family member. How do you encourage families to self-report if they have individuals who have issues, family members, or who have issues? And the second one is something that I have just encountered recently. If you have a church member who's undergone a traumatic experience, and I'm not sure that this is something our church does, just like to encourage the church to offer them services, I guess, for, you know, PTSD counseling or something, I guess.
Right. Good. Okay. So I'll answer the first question first. Is how we did it at our church was, we have quarterly business meetings. And in our business meeting, it was one of our agendas because it was less formal. It's not during the church service, and it's about business. And so we utilized on the agenda that, you know, that was one of the agenda items. And we passed out the cards and everything then. And we let them fill them out and turn them in there. And then they have a box in the corridor of the church. So if someone took it home and brought it back, they could put them in there as well. And they just check the box and keep them. And that way it didn't seem intrusive, because you could have guests there who are not members. And this way, only members are typically at your business meeting. And so that helped that way.
Okay.
Okay. The other question I would say, when you have someone, especially someone that you know who has went through some trauma, and let's just say that trauma could potentially bring in some depression, some grief, some PTSD because of the event in of itself. The best thing you can do as a family, friend, or loved one is to stay connected and keep leaning in. And if you see over time resiliency setting in and they're coming on back to their normal self, then you know that they're able to self-manage and things are going okay. If not, and they seem like they're spiraling out or things might be getting worse, part of it is maybe encouraging them to seek help, encouraging them to talk to somebody. Have you talked to somebody? And if the church themselves have just community resources based on their geographical area, it's good to be able to give them a card that says, hey, this is somebody that you can talk to. These are some people you can talk to. If you have staff on church on hand, like we give out we have a whole hotline that they can just call, and whoever's on for the day can talk to them. But never discount you. Never discount yourself to say, hey, if you need to talk to somebody, I'm willing to talk to you. At a minimum, I can give you a listening ear. At a minimum, I can give you, I can be there. I can pray with you. I can give you a listening ear. I can be with you. And depending on my schedule, I can even come sit with you. but all in the name of supporting them in the process of mental health recovery.
Right, okay.
You know? So the thing is that you just don't want to leave them out there and hope they get there, because some may not get there.
Right.
You know,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Nick, I'm sorry, it's Connie. Along the same lines as what you were just talking about. What I was wondering is families, turn in information about a loved one who is struggling. And that information has to go through kind of a chain of command, if you will, within a church setting. How do you do that and still maintain the confidentiality and the privacy for the person that is affected?
So we tell them in the business meeting that the information will be kept confidential, and it will be only accessible to the pastors and the church secretary. So we tell them that that's where the information will be, will be shared. The church secretary logs it into a database, and the pastor will know, just in case the pastor has to give some information, the pastor recognizes somebody or knows somebody, so they'll know as well, or the pastor has some further insight on the individual in case a crisis or something like that happens and they want to ask the pastor some information. But for the most part, there's key personnel that have the information, and we ensure them that the information is kept confidential. We only pass the information on, and a couple times we passed the information on to the EMTs that came to the church,
Okay.
because it had information on everything, including medication that they're taking or not taking, so on and so forth. So, and at the bottom of the form, there is a statement where they're signing and giving us permission to release the information to EMTs if needed.
So if I'm a door usher or greeter, whatever word we're using, if I'm a greeter and I notice somebody who is in distress, notice somebody who, something just seems off, I don't have this information that may have been turned in by the families. I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm shooting from the hip. I'm using my own compassion and my own heart and allowing God to lead me in this situation. Is that enough information for me right now?
Well,
Just knowing that God has put me in this place, in this time, and so as we are working with volunteers,
yeah,
right? How do we prepare them for someone who's struggling with mental health issues?
Great question, Connie. So I know the safety team, I know this at the Potter's House, the safety team, the PMTs, which are I forgot what they're known for, the ushers, and the safety and security team. They are all trained, security a little bit more in other things, but the rest are all trained in observation and some of the basic things that we can do at our level through observation. And then with the safety team, if we have an incident, if we have an observation, the ushers or the greeters are all told, when you talk to the individual, if you talk to the individual, they're okay. They just need to talk to somebody, whatever that looks like. There is a form that they fill out with the member's name or visitor's name, their address, their phone number, their contact information, and someone will cross-reference that to a database if they're a member, if we've got something on them. If we don't, we still have the services on hand to make sure that they get, treated or anything like that. And we always have someone follow up. So no matter what, even if they were a visitor, someone from that team or that counseling group will reach out and say, hey, we're just checking on you. We want to make sure you're good. You had a concern last Sunday. And we want to make sure you're good and how you're doing, and just following up to make sure you're good. And if you don't mind, we'll pray for you and hope everything continues to be well with you. So yeah, we don't rely on them to always do a lot of the technical stuff that the security team would go, but just that observation alone, that, to your point, consoling, being there with them, reassuring them, until some additional help gets there, all of that becomes part of the report that we write up. And so we know that the information is getting to where it needs to get to, and we follow up accordingly, but at least we have that on file. And to your point, what's interesting is that we found that something like this happened to a visitor. They were actually not a member, but they were a visitor. And while we didn't have anything on file about their mental health, they were able to say, this is the third time they've been here, and this has happened. The similar symptoms happened all 3 times. So they could see the pattern and still follow up with them and encourage them to, get some further help, so on and so forth. So you could still track the pattern and still, so then what does that do when we see them again the 4th time or ongoing? Then you got someone that's just watching them, making sure they're good because of the history.
So a couple things I want to piggyback onto that. One of the things we used to talk about in our pre-serve meetings is about touching. Like, so you have people who are your greeters, ushers, guest experience, lobby hosts, whatever. And so they serve from a place of compassion. So we had to talk about, everybody does not want to be touched if they are having a crisis. Like, you have to discern whether or not that's a place where you can move in and go, oh, we just want to be here and love on you. That might be the wrong thing. But I mean, that's a whole training. We can't get into it tonight, but that's one thing. And then I had a couple questions. How important is it for the safety teams and the security teams to get to know those folks? Like
Very
tenders and
very important.
And build some kind of rapport. Yeah.
Right. Very important, because you may very well see them again. And if you see them again or they see you again, they remember. They're less apprehensive. They feel more assured. They feel more safe. Versus it being somebody new each time. I mean, there's been a situation where a young lady knew the usher that helped her the first time, and that's who she called for.
It also helps put the other congregants at ease from what I've seen. So we got a call one Sunday that this kid is just pacing around and he's making noise, and what's he doing? And so people were kind of on edge, like, is he violent? Is he whatever? And so the welcome folks called security, and when security got there, they were like, oh, this is Billy, right? We know Billy, and he's fine, and we'll just hang back and kind of let him do his thing. That was his expression of praise and worship, but because he was nonverbal and kind of loud and kind of quirky, the people around him didn't know what was happening. But because that security team member knew him and knew his parents and was able to say, oh, no, this is his normal expression, right? So we had to be careful not to isolate people, and to also make sure that the people around them are comfortable to know that we know them. That's the other. If they're regular attenders, I mean, if they're a guest, that's going to be a little difficult, but. And then what do you do with a regular attender they have a narcissistic personality. They're also drinking, and they're walking in anger. Like, how do you manage them, diffuse that? I mean, you're aware of all of these things, but apparently they're disruptive, right? So what do you do with that?
So first and foremost, your first warning sign is the smell of alcohol. And so with the smell of alcohol, I would say the safety and security team would definitely escort them not amongst the big congregation, and just get them to a place where you can talk to them, you can reason with them. Yeah, they're gonna make it about them. They're gonna go in and out of victim mode. There'll be a lot of that, but what you got to do is I'm real big on trying to stay in de-escalation mode, stay in reassuring mode, stay in do you want us to call somebody? Are you okay? Is there anything that we can give you or that you need right now? Those type of things that kind of calms them down. But when somebody's under the influence, oftentimes you got to let that play itself out. And so your best option is to keep them not only safe, but away from others, because it could turn into erratic behavior. It could turn into disruptive behavior, because if they're loud and they're obnoxious and they because it doesn't have to be something really, really, really detrimental that happens, but somebody who's under the influence can fight somebody, can strike somebody or something, or just be disruptive themselves by yelling and screaming and disrupting the service. So to minimize that, isolate them or have a place where you can take them, talk to them, so on and so forth. People get, especially guys, get real sober when it's about 5 dudes around them. That's a whole lot bigger than they are.
Listen, funny story, and then I'll come back to this. We're having a concert. We're packed. There's a guy who's, had a couple. And he's like, now chatting with the ladies close by, right? And I just went by the security team, was like, you want to take a peek? And literally, 2 of them walked up to him and was like, so how you doing? He was like, I know. And he left. Now, we didn't let him leave the premises. We actually got him in an Uber and took his car keys. It was a whole production. But he was like, yeah, I'm going to go now. I'm going to go now. So sometimes it just takes a little conversation to say, yeah, we're not going to be able to do this. But my take on it is, if it's escalated to the point of we've had this conversation several times, the person's angry, they're erratic, at that point it needs to escalate to whether or not they can be on campus, because that becomes a real safety issue at some point.
That's good. Yep.
And then I had a question about sharing your self-reporting card. Can you send that to me? And then I can send it to everybody.
Okay, I have to get it from, I'll get a sample from it.
Okay. And then I'll send it out and then I'll put it on the website. Anybody else? We're coming up on time. We got 4 minutes. I want to respect everybody's time. And we have any more questions? Comments?
I hope this was good.
Great.
Thank you.
I think, Chris, you're talking, but you're on mute.
Thank you. You'd think after all these Zooms, we would have the technology figured out,
Yeah,
right?
we still don't get it. Our new vernacular post-COVID is you're on mute.
Yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about staff or people that are trained to support mental illness and stuff. And Nick, we do have, I think there's like 10 folks. They're older professionals that have been doing kind of the work that sounds like you've devoted your life to. And at the end of every service, there is a call from whoever closes the service in prayer, that if somebody just wants somebody to pray with them or somebody to talk to, that prayer team will be down front, right? So I just assumed that a lot of churches do that these days. Our church has. I just don't go to a lot of other churches, right? So to the extent that that you have the folks that are capable of supporting the congregation in that way. That's something that we do. And on Monday evenings at our church, we do have a care and recovery groups that meet every Monday for about 2 hours. And anything, I mean, we have an Alcoholics Anonymous group, divorce care, grief care, and it really kind of ebbs and flows with the needs of the church, right? They change every quarter. But depending on what's been happening, and it's interesting, I'd say that about a third of the people that participate are from our church, and it's people that either word of mouth or just friend networks or something hear about it and they come. And then the last thing I wanted to offer, somebody was talking about confidentiality of information and how it is shared. For our security team, we use Slack. I think Angelia, it was you that got us set up on that a long time ago. And we have a persons of interest channel that is a secure channel that only by invitation is accessed. And anytime we have any unique situation that requires communication, but decorum and confidentiality, that's where that information is shared, right? And there's a very small core of people that have access to that information. So just wanted to share that's some of the things that we've learned, and it fits with some of the things you talked about, Nick. And a lot of that was driven by Angelia's coaching in years gone by, right? So thank you, Angelia.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, Nick, a couple people have said in the chat to feel better, and they appreciate you being here even though you were sick. I'm glad we're on Zoom, because as much as I love you, brother, I don't want your sore.
Your cooties to yourself.
We're such a
What you said, Connie.
Keep them in Texas. Keep them in Texas.
Anybody got anything else before we end? Anybody want to close us in prayer?
Sure, I will. This is Mark. I'll do it real quick. Thank you, God, for this evening. Thank you, God, for Angelia and her team. Thank you, God, so much for Chris, for his sharing of his expertise, his perspective, his wisdom. I pray, God, for each of us at our churches, as we all have such a passion and concern for those who come into our doors and onto our property, that we want them to be safe. But we also want them to be able to be connected with you and with each other. And I pray, God, all of us will know the right way to handle things, that you'll give us all the wisdom. And above all, give us all the safety as we carry out the things that we all want to do. I ask, God, your blessing and protection on everyone here tonight. And until the next time, we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Nick.
Thank you.
Hope you
Thanks,
feel
Nick.
better, bud. Thank you.
You appreciate you.
Good night.
Take care.